And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we got some more Battle for Baldur's Gate cards to talk about. Some of the legendary creatures that I find to be a little more interesting. So we're going to start off with Kedira, Caller of the Small. 1 green and a white Orc Ranger 3/3 with Trample. Whenever Kedira, Caller of the Small, deals combat damage to a player for each token you control, create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. That's pretty good. I'm actually surprised this is just an uncommon. This seems pretty darn good. Like, I know the comparisons to Najeela are a bit much, but it is similar in what's happening here, right? Because what you're doing is you're creating tokens that are then going to create you more tokens, which is sort of what Najeela does. Najeela is just super busted the way they did it. This is a more fair version, I suppose. But, I mean, if you think about it this way, I cast a Raise the Alarm on turn 2. Get a couple of tokens. Turn 3, I cast my Kedira. Maybe not. I don't attack till turn 4. I mean, if you had a Greaves or something, you could attack right away. But let's say I don't attack till turn 4. And getting in for damage, 3/3 trample should not be an issue here. You don't have to. It doesn't matter how much damage you deal. You just have to connect. That's all that matters. So now on turn 4, I'm about to attack. But before I do, I'm going to cast something else that makes tokens, right? And they can be any kind of tokens. They can be treasure tokens, right? Any kind of tokens will do. And so now let's say I have 5 tokens in play. I attack with my Kedira and I'm going to get 5 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens, right? Because I'm doing as many tokens as I have in, however many tokens I control, that's how many rabbits I'm getting. So that's 5 on top of the possible creature tokens that I already have, right? This can get out of hand real fast. And I have a deck, my Shanna deck is a Selesnya token theme, which I might put this card into. I got lots of token generators in there, and for me, I win quite a bit with that deck because you just need lots of creature protection, which green and white have. It's really easy to protect your board. I know people say, "Oh, they just cast a board wipe." Well, you got Heroic Intervention, you got Flawless Maneuver, and you got Rootborn Defenses is the best one because obviously it populates and creates another token for you, right? So Dauntless Escort, Selfless Spirit, I mean, I could do this all day, right? It's very easy to protect your board in green and white colors, so that's going to be important here. But I really think it's going to be super easy to grow a giant army of rabbits, which I'm sure everyone's going to love, very, very quickly. And then, of course, throw down an Anthem effect and win the game pretty quickly after that. I think this is a pretty powerful commander. All right, next up, we got a really interesting one here. Alundo the Seer, 2 green and a blue. Human Shaman 3/5. Tap, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand and put a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. It gains whenever the last time counter is removed from this card. If it's exiled, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you cast a creature spell this way, it gains haste until end of turn. That's just suspend. I don't know why they didn't just say suspend. It could have saved a lot of words. How is it different than suspend? It gains when the last time counter is removed from a card. Oh, I see. It's not removed on your upkeep. That's why. Oh boy, I read this card wrong the first time. This is, okay, so then remove a time counter from each other card you own. Okay, I see. So that's why it's not like suspend. I was thinking, why is this is just suspend, right? It's not. Because suspend removes time counters at the beginning of your upkeep. This doesn't. There is nothing. I just assumed that it did that. It doesn't. It only removes the time counters when you use the ability. That's very interesting. Wow, this card just became a lot more interesting. Okay, I mean, obviously there are a few ways to remove time counters. You could have Joyer's Time Bug, something like that. Or maybe that doesn't even work because I think it specifically says suspended card, doesn't it? It does. Yeah. So that doesn't work because this is not a suspended card. Oh, wow. Okay. So all of the stuff that refer to time, because there's a lot of cards that refer to time counters, removing them, but it has to be from a suspended card, and these won't be suspended because it's not suspend, right? So, yeah, the only way, I mean, there might be other ways to get the counters off. It may be one way that I can think of, but mostly you're going to be removing the counters by using your commander's ability. Right? Because if you tap, first of all, I'll just say this is pretty good card advantage. You are drawing a card here. You're not just, it's not like with Joyera where you just suspend a card and it leaves your hand. You're actually drawing a card first. So you're not losing any card advantage. So even if you never get that card out of exile, you haven't lost anything. You're just looting essentially, right? So that's okay. So you draw a card, then exile a card from your hand and put a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. So of course, cheating giant stuff into play is not going to work here either. I suppose you could just use your commander's ability a whole ton. Like putting lots of untappers in here is going to be big. Fate Stitcher, 1,000-Year Elixir, obviously for sure. You want to be untapping and using this ability more than once a turn. And then when you use the ability, see, the problem is the quotes, right? You always got to watch where those quotes are. And the then remove a time counter from each other card you own in exile is not in quotes. It's part of the activated ability. So you remove the counters from everything from each card you own in exile, each other card, so not the one you just exiled, each other one. So if you have 5 cards in exile with time counters on them, they're just sitting there. They don't get the time counters removed until you use this ability. Now you're going to use it, draw a card, exile something, and remove the counters from everything else. So you probably don't want to go big here. You probably want to go small. You probably want to have things that cost 1 or 2, right? Because if I have a Nature's Claim in my hand and I draw a card and then exile it, then the next time I use my ability on my commander, the time counter comes off and I can immediately cast it, right? And so I think that's probably better than trying to stick giant things in exile. This is not like a Joyra at all, I don't think, because there's not really a lot of ways to cheat those time counters off. So I think you just want to go straight value here. Like this is just straight value. That's the way I see this commander. You're drawing a card on top of that. So if I draw a card and then cast the Nature's Claim for free, that's pretty good value. It's not stupendous, but it's pretty good. You're also doing a second draw each turn. So again, Archmage Ascension, another deck you can try to make that card work because you're probably going to get that second draw on every turn. You are doing a little bit of the looting thing. I mean, you're not looting because you're not discarding, but you are doing drawing, probably more than once each turn. So having, whenever you draw effects in here might be good as well. And then also you're exiling from your hand. And I'm trying to think if there's anything. I know there's some in white that care about, like the Raynar effects where they care about you exiling stuff from your hand. So that might be a good fit there as well. Interesting command. It's actually a lot more interesting than the first read I gave it because I was like, oh, just giving cards to spend. That's boring. It's actually a little more interesting than that. I kind of like this one. Next up, we got John Arenicus, Shattered One, 2 blue and a black, Elf Wizard 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent gains control of up to 1 target creature you control. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it and tap it. It's goaded for the rest of the game, and it gains this creature can't be sacrificed. That's very interesting. I mean, again, with the goading, we have goading in like every color now. Apparently every color goads. Whenever a creature you own but don't control attacks, you may draw a card. Very interesting. The donate. It's funny about the donate thing. I just talked about Yukuro the Prisoner, I think, in my challenging commanders to build around, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny if they had a way you could donate your horrible commander to your opponent? And then when it dies, they have to sacrifice all their creatures. Here's a way to do it, right? That guy goes in this deck, right? Because not only are you going to donate your creatures to your opponents, but you're going to want to donate horrible ones, right? Horrible ones with horrible downsides, and there are a lot, right? You can give them that Yukuro, and then it can't be sacrificed, but it's eventually going to die, and then they have to sacrifice all their creatures. Grid monitor, right? There's lots of... You could do the research with a lot of those commanders, like... Blim and Zedru. I almost forgot his name there for a second. It's been so long since I've seen that commander. Those guys do a lot of donating really bad stuff, and you could find the really bad creatures that not only are they going to be goated, but they're going to be, a pain in the butt for your opponents to have. So it's going to be one of those commanders. You're probably not going to be making any friends with this. On top of that, though, whenever a creature you own but don't control attacks, you draw a card. There's lots of other ways to do that as well. Gilded Drake is a like $400 card or something because they play it in CDH so much. But that, for example, that would be a good one, right? Now, that being said, it's not probably going to be goated, so your opponent's not necessarily going to attack with it. But there are other ways that you can swap creatures with people. Phyrexian Infiltrator, I believe, is the name of the card, which is actually black and blue, which fits here as well. The other interesting thing you could do is you could swap back, where you could give your opponent a creature, put 2 counters on it, and tap it. It's goaded for the rest of the game, and then Phyrexian Infiltrator, swap it back so that you now gain control of your own creature again, but now it's got counters on it. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a few ways you can go with this. You could definitely just do the, I'm going to give my opponent horrible creatures, and have them have to deal with it. And on top of that, they have to attack with them. Like this falls into the sort of blim, maybe send triplets, those kinds of commanders that people go, oh, he's going to be screwing with me the whole game, right? People, when you start a game with like that, even though this guy seems interesting and fun, when you start a game with a guy like this in the command zone, I just think people look at it and go, oh, he's going to be screwing with me. He's going to be goading my creatures. He's going to be donating me horrible stuff. So there, you could get into that situation a little bit, so you might want to be careful there. Next up, Faldorn, Dread, Wolf, Herald. 1 green and a red human druid 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell from exile or a land enters the battlefield under your control from exile, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. Okay, so we're doing exile already, and we're doing tokens and wolf tribal a little bit here already. You can pay 1, then tap, discard a card, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So there is a lot going on here. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, another exile tribal commander, because man, are they ever pouring it on with the exile tribal? Hey, like with the I exile stuff and I may play it. I mean, we already kind of talked about a commander that's doing that, but this is doing a lot. I mean, obviously you can do, and red does the impulse draw, right? So I exile something and then I can play it. There's tons in there already. There's tons of other support for I play stuff from exile. In green and red, it's a little bit different. That's why I like this. Is a little bit more unique in green and red. You're also doing the wolf thing, which I kind of like. That's pretty interesting. And also, you're doing the discard theme. You could do the exile thing. You could just load your deck up with impulse draw. And I mean, this is whenever you cast a spell from exile or land. I wonder if these people are going to go after this just like they did with Prosper, because it is very similar. I mean, Prosper is giving you treasure tokens, which is allowing you to do more stuff from exile. So maybe that's better, but this is, I mean, there's no limitation here, right? This is just whenever you cast a spell from exile or a land. And so the more stuff you cast, you can just crank out those green wolves. Hey. And then of course you can do some wolf tribal stuff as well, where, I mean, there's a lot you can do there. So there is a lot you can do with this. And then also, like I said, I think the discard, don't forget about that. You can throw a Surly Badgesaur in this deck so that now you're even getting value out of every time you use your commander's ability as well. I think this is going to be a popular one for sure. For sure, because of first of all, the number of things that are going on here. It's actually doing quite a bit, but also very reminiscent of Prosper, I think. And I think a lot of people are going to like that a lot. So I think this is going to be a popular one. All right, and we are finishing off today with the Council of 4, 3 white and a blue Human Noble 08. Oh, that's a big butt. So you have a fantastic blocker in your commander already, which is kind of nice. And for anyone who's played a K&T deck before, it's actually a 2/8, which just makes it it just makes your life so much easier having a commander with a giant butt like that, because you go to attack the guy and it's like, oh, what's the point, right? So you sort of just never get attacked because you got this giant blocker that your opponents are just not going to bother attacking you because they're never going to get in for damage. Anyway, whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, you draw a card. Whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, you create a 2/2 white knight creature token. And I was super excited about this one when I first saw it. I was like, wow, that's really cool, really interesting. It's like the opposite of Alundo, where now I'm looking at it the second time and I'm less excited than I was when I originally read it. Because first of all, you're relying entirely on your opponents, which is not super great for a build around. And there really isn't much of a build around here, actually. This is sort of a good stuff commander. It's like Mangara, right? It's very similar to Mangara. Like if you're building a Mangara deck, what are you building around? There's not really anything that you're building around. Mangara is a good commander for, I just have a theme in white, and then I'm going to have Mangara as my commander because I'll get some extra card draw. Some card draw in the command zone. I can maybe keep my opponents from attacking me. That's all this guy is. You can't really, I mean, what you can do if you want to try and build around this, okay, here's what you can do. You can make your opponents draw a card during their turn, okay? I mean, making your opponent draw a second card on their turn so that you get to draw a card, that doesn't seem like that's not really card advantage then, right? You're letting your opponents, right? So if that's your plan is, I'm going to put something. Like if you put a Howling Mine in this deck, okay, so let's say you put a Howling Mine in this deck. Whenever a player draws their second card during their turn. So if you put a Howling Mine in your deck, on everyone's turn, they're going to be drawing their second card, so you're going to be drawing a card. That's actually not bad. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So Cameo the Crescent Moon, again, another option there. There are a few, obviously, everyone draws. So if you ensure that all your opponents are drawing an extra card each turn, And the opposite of John Arenicus, people are going to like you for this, right? You're sort of playing a pseudo hug. I guess it's very similar to Quain, now that I think about it, for that reason, because you're sort of playing a pseudo hug deck by doing that. So if you do the Cammy, the Crescent Moon, Howling Mind, Dictative, Crew Fix, all those kinds of cards, your opponents are going to get to draw a second card each turn, which they're going to like, and then you're going to be drawing like crazy. So now you really want like that Oneirophage and all of the Nadir Kraken and all those cards that when you draw, X happens, because you're going to be doing that a lot. So the cast a second spell each turn, that you definitely can't build around. You can't force your opponents to cast spells. Don't put an Arcane Laboratory in here, I guess. Whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, so it has to be their turn, which typically it is, you create a 2/2 white Night creature token, and you could do a little bit of Night Tribal here. That's probably the way I would go with this. There's not a ton to build around here. You're really open-ended with what you're doing with this deck, so maybe if you have some sort of Azorius strategy that you want to do, this would be a good commander for just, like I said, just like Mangara. It's just, you don't have to play around this at all. You just throw it down, and it's going to draw you cards and make you Night tokens every once in a while. It's going to happen. Your opponents are going to draw a second card on their turn from time to time, guaranteed, and they're going to be casting their second spell on their turn, guaranteed. So it is a good commander for that. But if you really wanted to build around it, like I said, you could do the Howling Mine effects, which might actually be a good strategy because you're going to make friends. And then on top of that, you're sort of sneakily, and when people draw more cards, they cast more spells, right? Again, you can't force your opponents to cast spells, but if you start filling up their hand, that's going to entice them to cast more spells. And so now you can maybe possibly be getting a Night token on everyone's turn, which is pretty darn good, actually. Maybe I'm coming around on this guy. And then you do a little bit of Night Tribal. And there's some pretty decent Night Tribal support in there as well. And you very sneakily sneak up on your opponents, and pretty soon you have a giant Night army and you can start swinging with it. Pretty interesting commander. Yeah, I like it a lot. Actually, 4 pretty interesting commanders here. So not too shabby. But that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.